Greetings, friends, and welcome once again to the Creation Soapbox, brought to you by your friends here at abitoforange.com. So the Darwinian Tree of Life is essentially a phylogenetic tree, a tree which is a picture representing different relationships between species based on having common ancestors. Now, originally the phylogenetic trees were created by Carl Linnaeus to organize living things, especially to group the created kinds. Carl Linnaeus intended to try to figure out, well, when Genesis says God made everything according to its kind, what were the kinds and how can we group them to sort of help understand the relationship between the different kinds? But since then, it has now been used to tell the evolutionary story based on many different methods. And the thing is, there is no universally accepted phylogenetic tree. Different methods result in different trees. If you go by skeletal structure, you'll have one tree. If you go by certain proteins, you'll have a different one. If you go by certain genes, you'll have a different one. There is no universally accepted phylogenetic tree. Thus, there is no universally accepted Darwinian Tree of Life. There's a lot of different ones depending on who you ask. They're always in flux and they're always based on guesswork. So here is essentially the Darwinian family tree. As I've shown here, the tree is laying down on its side, but let's flip it up. So the distant past is at the bottom and the present is up at the top. We start off with rocks. Rocks became soup. Soup became something like bacteria, which branched out both in the direction of plants and animals. And then bacteria somehow became worms, it somehow became fish, that became lizards, that became rodents, became primates, which became us. And at the apex there, Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. Growing the tree is everything. The evolutionary story requires mechanisms which can grow the tree of life to get from bacteria to everything else. It has to get from bacteria to wolves and cabbages. Those mechanisms must add branches and limbs to the tree of life, or they can't be part of the evolutionary story. So the tree again starts off with bacteria at the bottom, and the top, all those edges of the branches, the very top, is everything living today. All of the plants and animals, all the bugs and fish, everything that exists today. Somehow, evolution has to explain how something like a bacteria can diversify into everything living today. Growing the tree means no chainsaws. Mechanisms which cut off the branches may be real, but they are the exact opposite of what the evolutionary story needs to account for the diversity of life. So if there's a mechanism which removes branches, like extinction events, that's not an evolutionary event, it's not an evolutionary mechanism, because evolution has to account for the adding of limbs and branches, not for the removal of limbs and branches. Thus, a mechanism that works as a chainsaw is not evolution. Also, describing what is not enough. A lot of people make this mistake. If you're going to explain the origin of a car, the origin of a car must explain the origin and assembly of its different parts. It is not enough to merely describe the parts it has, or to compare it to other cars. Evolution must explain where anatomical structures and functions came from, not merely describe what they are, or compare them to other existing ones. In this presentation, we are going to look at mechanisms of evolution. These are proposed in any documentary or textbook or biology classroom where evolution is assumed as true, the most common of which are natural selection, genetic drift, migration, and mutations. The question is, will they grow the Darwinian Tree of Life? Evolution 101. I get a lot of this information from evolution.berkeley.edu, which is a website calling itself Evolution 101, intending to educate the public about what evolution is. Here's what the experts at Berkeley have to say. The basic evolutionary mechanisms, mutation, migration, genetic drift, and natural selection, can produce major evolutionary change if given enough time. A change in gene frequency over time means that the population has evolved. Although genetic drift is a mechanism of evolution, it doesn't work to produce adaptations. Any coffee table book about natural history will overwhelm you with full-page glossies depicting amazing adaptations produced by natural selection, such as the examples below, and then they show pictures of examples. So here is my metaphor. Metaphors, we're going to start with a normal deck of playing cards. What would it take to bring about the Archduke of Hearts? Now, there's already a suit of hearts, there's already face cards, but the only ones that exist now are the Jack, the Queen, and the King. What would we have to do to create the Archduke of Hearts? How do we get that to come into being? So we'll be doing that next time. I hope you enjoyed this bit of orange. Thanks for joining us. If you want to see more of what we got, check us out at abitoforange.com or on our YouTube channel. And as always, thanks for watching. And remember, Jesus loves you.